Hey everyone, and welcome to the third installment of our Dungeon Speedrun Breakdown series. Today we're going to be talking about the long-awaited Prophecy World Record in under 5 minutes, of course performed by Crew, Gab, and Alex732. So this run was actually gotten before the final shape, so a couple things have changed, we'll talk about those things, but let's get started with Team Comp first. So let's go ahead and head over to Alex's POV here. This run is performed on 2 Warlocks and 1 Hunter. So why are they on these classes? Well, the first Warlock is because of the cube encounter, or the hexahedron encounter. Hexahedron, or cube, as we'll get into later in this video, is a very complex and movement-sensitive encounter, so Warlock's access to Phoenix Dive and Icarus Dash and other neutral movement tech like Nade Skating is going to help it a lot. So Warlock is 100%, no questions asked, the cube class. Next up, we have another Warlock on something called Cube Skip. So as we're going to talk about later in this video, currently in Proph record, how things are done is from Cube to Kell Echo, you have one person skip about a third of the way to Kell Echo, and then you have 2 people duo Cube. In the future, right now actually, Crew is experimenting with running Fireteam with something called a sync box skip. And sync box, I won't get into the nitty gritty, but it's basically a pretty complicated tech that allows you to break very far out of the box or the playable area in Destiny, so that you can get very, very far out of the map. And this allows you to get all the way to Kell Echo during Cube. So now what you would do is you would have one person solo cube, which is considerably harder than duo, and then you would have one person skip all the way to Kell Echo, and one person do the skip around halfway, like 1/3 of the way to Kell Echo to hit a prerequisite checkpoint. Okay, so that's currently the plan there. Now, a Warlock doesn't have to be the one doing cube skip. You can theoretically have a Hunter do cube skip for better damage on both bosses, but this is just kind of a micro adjustment that could be made in the future. But for now, the Warlock is the one on cube skip here. That's our friend Gab, who we're going to be watching in just a moment. Next up, we have a Hunter. Okay, so the Hunter, the entire reason the Hunter is here, outside of for boss damage, is because Hunter is the only one that has access to a fast skating tech right when you load into the dungeon. So Alex's job here is going to be getting to Phalanx as quickly as humanly possible. He can do it faster than his Warlock friends because he can just shatter skate straight through the portal and straight up the pipe to get to Phalanx and start it as quickly as possible. We've talked about time gating before. What is the gate of the dungeon right when it starts? And that's going to be starting Phalanx Echo. That's going to be what is your slowest limiting factor. So let's go ahead and watch Alex do his thing. So as you see here, he's going to go ahead and hit something called a long line. We talked about this during the throne breakdown. But basically, it just allows you to line from a very long distance from a ledge by just initiating your shatter skate, your right click early, and then doing your jump and shatter dive inputs later. Now you'll notice another thing that he does there is he swaps from a vortex frame sword to an adaptive frame sword here. Now, something that you might not know is that obviously the Eager Edge perk has like an internal cooldown. Everyone knows that. But something you might not know is that you can swap swords at the cost of, half your ammo, and you can regain the perk and not have any cooldown. So as you can see here, Alex knows this Eager Edge internal timer pretty well. And he knows that in some maybe rare cases, if you were to try an Eager right out of the portal, right after shatter skating off that long line ledge there, you might not have Eager Edge back in time. And so swapping swords allows him to sword out quickly as soon as he exits this portal, which is very important because he's the one that needs to get to Phalanx as fast as possible to start it. Now, another question you might have is why not swap from Vortex Sword to Vortex Sword? Why swap from like Vortex to Adaptive? Well, the reason for this was Season 23 was when this was ran, and so Vortex frame swords were a little new, and Alex has been running with an adaptive for a long time now. So he was very used to the amount of momentum he would get off of this skate bounce in particular. So with a Vortex frame, you go considerably higher here, so I suppose he was just not as used to it, so an adaptive, plenty fast enough for this section, and just a little bit easier on him in terms of timing. Okay, so the last thing we're going to go ahead and talk about here is Alex. He has no ammo, right? He's basically no heavy ammo. He's on stasis with no abilities. What is he going to do to help his team during Phalanx and for the rest of the dungeon? How is he going to proceed? Well, thankfully, Phalanx is one of the encounters in this game that can have a perma flag placed. Okay, we've talked about permas before in our raid speedrun breakdowns, but basically what this is sometimes encounters, when you start them, right, they erase their flag. So let's just call it FE, flag erase, actually earlier than you can place a flag before the flag prompt goes away. So if you actually manage to place a flag, here instead of here, then the flag will stay because the encounter has not tried to erase it. It tried to erase it before you placed it, right? So in this case, this rally prompt actually stays so long that it persists after that flag erase check is done. So that allows Alex to actually place the flag on a specific queue. When the boss spawns in, he starts holding E, he interacts, and then boom, he places this flag, and this flag will persist throughout the rest of the encounter. You can still only rally to it once, but it's going to stay until, these guys need it, really. So he's going to go ahead and rally on, Blade Barrage and Parasite. We're going to come back to Alex's POV later, but that's all you need to know for now. Let's go ahead and look at Crew's POV next. So what is Crew doing at the start of this dungeon? Well, he's just going to follow Alex up the pipe here. So let me go ahead and skip forward. Obviously, he is not on Hunter, so he has to use Heat Rises and sorting into an incline here in order to boost himself, get a lot of speed. And now he is going to sword his way over to the encounter. Alex has obviously gone and started it, and Crew is going to Phoenix Dive in order to trigger Reaper. This is because Alex is on Star Eater scales, and because he needs a bunch of orbs in order to supercharge his Blade Barrage, having someone else make a single orb for him is going to be a little bit helpful, so he doesn't have to do all the work himself. Crew is going to go ahead and pick up 5 light motes, and then he's going to do something called a double dunk. Double dunking in Proph is something that's been part of speedruns for a long time, but it was discovered a long time ago that you could jump high in the air above the 2 dunks, and if you dunked in the middle of them, maybe slightly towards the top dunk, if I'm not mistaken, you will cleanse both of them at the same time. So Crew's going to go ahead and do that, and then he's going to give himself Radiant and start doing damage. So that's it for Crew. Finally, we're going to go ahead and look at Gab's POV. So what's Gab doing at the start of the dungeon? Well, he's obviously doing the same thing Crew is doing. He's following Alex, except he doesn't actually follow Alex. He gets on his Sparrow, and he heads down here and starts killing this Knight, and he picks up Dark Motes. Interesting. Well, for those of you that are clever, you might know that Phalanx Echo only spawns 3 Knights at the start of its spawning phase, which means that only drops 9 motes. 9 motes is only enough to do 1 double dunk, right? 3 Knights is only enough to do 1 double dunk. So what does Gab do? Well, before the encounter is even started up there, he gets 3 Dark Motes from down here, which is pretty clever, and then he makes his way up this pipe. He's gonna mountaintop, same thing Crew was doing. He gets a little stuck here, not really a big deal though, because he ends up double dunking around the same time as Crew anyway, not really time loss. He's going to go ahead and kill this Knight, pick up his Dark Motes, and then boom, double cleanse, quadruple cleanse from the boys, and then they're going to do Phalanx damage. So what does Gab actually do for damage? He's on Tractor and until its return. Crew is on Horseman, Rain of Fire, which you probably saw. And then our friend Alex is of course on Starter Skills Blade Barrage like we mentioned, but he's also on Parasite because he's built up those stacks off of killing the Orange Bar Knights. So as you can see here, boss falls over pretty fast. And like we mentioned, right, Gab obviously has no well because he was not able to rally when he was with his team. And he has like no heavy ammo, no sword ammo either. So what's he going to do? That's what the perma flag is for. He's going to switch stuff. He's going to rally. And now he's going to get ready to head down to the Wasteland. The last thing we're going to talk about with Gab here is he's going to sword away from this teleporter as it begins to suck him in. And then he's going to do something called dive swapping, which we talked about in the Pit of Heresy breakdown. He's going to Phoenix Dive. And he's going to swap his class ability so that now he's not in the Phoenix Dive animation anymore, and he's falling very quickly through this elevator instead of slowly sinking. And then boom, we're in Wasteland. So let's go ahead and swap to Crew's POV so we can talk about Wasteland. So what's going on as soon as you enter Wasteland? Well, Crew is getting up on this ledge here, and he's going to do a particular thing. Now, some of you might have remembered in the past when you've talked to maybe other speedrunners before or just people in the speedrunning community that Prophecy has some of the worst dungeon RNG in the game when it comes to being a speedrunner. And there's 2 major factors that contribute to this. Number 1 is Wasteland, and number 2 is, of course, Cube or Hexahedron. Let's talk about why Wasteland has bad RNG. I'm going to go ahead and draw here, and let's imagine Wasteland as like a map, right? As a map. You have the exit over here. You have the top right blight over here. You have the top left blight over here, you have the middle blight over here, you have the bottom right blight over here, and then you have the bottom left blight over here, okay? Now, you would imagine, obviously you need to destroy 3 sets of blights, you would imagine that the optimal pathing is something that leads you straight to the exit, like this, right? So obviously the optimal RNG would be bottom left to mid to top right, because it's a natural direction to move in. However, you could always get RNG, maybe something like, top left to bottom right, to bottom left, or even worse, maybe something like top left to top right to bottom left. And the reason why this is so bad is because you need to cross the Wasteland 1, 2, 3, 4 times before you make it to the exit, which is a lot of distance traveled and a lot of downtime, right? Whereas if you were to get bottom left to top right, you would basically just be moving in a single direction. This is more linear than it might seem on my map, okay? So these guys, obviously, because this is an optimized speedrun and they were running for this RNG, they actually happen to get bottom left to mid to top right in this run. So you'll see exactly what I mean. Now, the other thing that I said that Crew is doing when he gets up on this kind of platform here is because these guys are so fast through the elevator, the blights are actually not spawned in when they first teleport into the Wasteland. So they have to wait here and be careful and kind of figure out when exactly the blights are going to spawn as they scout by sweeping their cameras from right to left. So as you can see here, Crew is sweeping his camera from bottom right to bottom left. He sees that it's bottom left and then he begins to skate there. So he's looking bottom right now. Now he looks bottom left, he sees the blights and he immediately lines there. Now, in order to optimize the kind of group configuration here in Wasteland, you have the person who sees the blights and gets there first, kill 2 of the blights, one person gets the other one, the person who killed 2 then hits Toland, and the other remaining team members go to middle so that they can scout and see where the next blight section is. So this way you can kind of stagger who is getting most of the blights versus who is scouting and alternate a little bit for some more optimal gameplay. Gab is going to go ahead and hit Toland here. They see that it's top right, which is the perfect RNG that they're looking for. And then Gab is going to leave on cube skip, which we talked about at the beginning of this video, which leaves Crew and Alex to duo the final set of blights, which of course is not very slow at all. Okay, so now someone's job is to get to the cube encounter as quickly as possible. And the reason for this is because when you actually get to cube, so let me show you here, Toland is not spawned in and neither is the rally prompt, right? So the reason for this is because Destiny 2 is a connection-based asset loading game, right? Which means that when you first get to an encounter, if you get there really quickly, maybe like earlier than you're supposed to, not all the assets are going to be loaded in. They're going to load in at a certain time past when a person gets to that encounter. So Crew's job at the end of Wasteland is to get to cube as fast as humanly possible. So how does Crew decide to do this? Well, he's a pretty mechanical player, right? So he's like, I'm just going to like line off my Sparrow and then, I'm going to dash bounce into this hallway and I'm going to ground line, which is, I would say, a pretty fast way of getting into cube. I'm not going to lie. And then Alex here, he's going to follow suit and you'll notice Crew just places his well and the flag circle still isn't spawned in, right? It still isn't spawned in. He's going to wait as soon as he sees Toland and as soon as he sees Alex start to place the flag, he is going to swipe into Toland and then rally. Okay, and now we're in cube. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in cube. So cube is, I think most dungeon runners agree, it is the most complex and movement intensive, maybe dungeon encounter in terms of strategy in the game, right? It's probably more complex than most raid encounters as well when it comes to speedrun strategy. So why is this? Well, I'm going to try and explain what's going on, but first let's go ahead and look at what these two players have equipped. Crew has Illumina, a sniper, and an eager edge sword on. The sword is because Crew is largely responsible for picking up most of the motes in this encounter. He is just going to be running over and vacuuming up all those motes and dunking them, right? I said most, it's all of the motes. He's getting all of them. And then the sniper is just for this room in particular. It's for room 1, and it's because the hobgoblin kills in this specific room are pretty important, right? Because they spawn in the knights that you need in order to get your motes. Whereas in the upcoming rooms, these guys are going to pre-kill hobgoblins to spawn in the knights in the next room, so it's not as time sensitive. And the reason why Crew is on a sniper in this room, you'll see he swaps to a rocket sidearm later, is because he told me that the projectile nature of the rocket sidearm makes it so that it doesn't register the kill as quickly, even if it's around the same time to kill. Sometimes the hobgoblin the game doesn't register that it's dead, as quickly as a hit scan weapon. He's also on Lumina to repeatedly trigger Ember of Benevolence on himself so that he can go ahead and get Phoenix Knives for every single room. That way he can drop out of the elevator as soon as he's teleported because he knows where to go. Okay, so that's what Crew's on. Alex, whose POV we're going to check in on later, he's on Xenophage and Ember of Empyrean in order to one-shot the knights as quickly as possible so that when Crew gets there, he can pick up the motes right away. For those of you who have done this dungeon before, you're probably aware that when you kill a knight, you can't pick up its motes right away. There's a waiting period before you can actually pick them up. So having someone who's able to one-shot the knights as quickly as possible is obviously very, very beneficial. Okay, so now that we've talked about this a little bit, we've yapped about it a little bit, let's talk about what the goal of the cube encounter actually is. Okay, so I like to imagine cube as a literal cube. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw a big old cube right now. Okay, this is a really fat cube. We're going to go ahead and draw a cube. Okay, so this is our cube. It's very wide, but yeah, you can see the 6 faces. I'm just going to go ahead and draw some, dashed lines here. And then you can imagine that the spawn room is the top of the cube, okay? Or the bottom, doesn't really matter. Top of the cube, okay? And then you can imagine every single dunk location as being like a portal, that leads you to an adjacent face of the cube. So every single face of the cube is a room, one of the 6 possible rooms. And all of these rooms, just like a cube, has an adjacent touching side on all 4 faces of the square face. So for example, this top dunk here, if you were to dunk there and you were to get into the elevator, it would send you to the top room. Okay, same thing with the right dunk, same thing with the left dunk. We're going to call this one the bottom dunk. I'm going to avoid drawing directly on top of it. And then the bottom, the underside of the cube, is going to be the boss room. Okay, does this make sense? So something important about how cube works, the reason why I say it's nice to visualize it as like a set of 6 faces, like a literal cube, is for 2 reasons. Number one, now it's intuitively understandable that every single face of the cube, every single room in this encounter is connected to 4 rooms and cannot connect to one of the rooms, right? Because there's 5 rooms besides the one that you're in. You can connect to 4 of them, get to 4 of them, and you can't connect to one of them, okay? Now, the way this encounter actually works, what is Toland trying to get you to do? So let's say in the first room, in spawn room, Toland can be on any of the 4 walls, top, right, bottom, or left. It's just random, right? So it's a 1 in 4 chance. So let's say you get the right dunk, right? Toland is hovering over the right dunk, which they did get in this run, okay? Toland is then going to lead you either, once you get to that right room, to the top room or the bottom room. And then he's going to continue to lead you in that direction. So what I'm saying is, no matter what room you go to, Toland is always going to try and wrap you either counterclockwise around the cube, or he's going to lead you clockwise around the cube. So basically what this means is, let's say you go from spawn to right. That means Toland is either going to go top, left, or he's going to go bottom and then left. Does that make sense? So Toland is either going to lead you one way around the cube, or he's going to lead you the other way around the cube. Okay, he's going to wrap you around the sides of the cube, and then once you've visited all 4 of the outer faces, he's going to send you to boss. Now, you might be asking, so where does the RNG actually come into play, or if you know where Toland is going to bring you? The RNG comes from sometimes, so there's a total of 5 dunks you need to make, right, in order to leave the cube encounter, from the spawn room being the first dunk to the one right before boss being the last dunk, right? And so let me go ahead and show you what I mean here. If you have dunks 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right, the RNG comes from Toland being on the ceiling. This is completely random. You can't control it. You'll either get 0 ceilings, 1 ceiling, or 2 ceilings. 1 ceiling means that your 3rd room is going to be replaced with Toland on the ceiling, and 2 ceilings means that your 2nd and 4th room will be replaced with Toland being on the ceiling. This is unavoidable time loss if it happens, and if it does happen, you know, you can't, even if you're performing really well, there's nothing you can do. You just lose time, right? Which is why this dungeon can be very punishing to run. Okay, so now that you actually understand where Toland goes and why he's going there, he wraps around the cube face, let's talk about how this encounter is actually performed. So Toland prediction is like a big concept that cube runners have to learn when they're running cube, and the way Toland prediction works is fairly simple. We talked about the mechanics already, right? He leads you around the sides of the cube. Well, when you get to a room, you're automatically looking in a specific direction. Let's say you're looking top, let's just call it top, right? And the way it's going to work is when you get teleported into the 2nd room after taking a portal from spawn, you're either going to be facing the correct direction where Toland is, or Toland is going to be behind you. So he's either going to be F or he's going to be B, right? And the way Toland works in this encounter, like execution-wise, is either you're going to go front, over and over because you're just kind of, again, traveling around the cube, or you're going to go back, over and over, right? It's always going to be behind you or always going to be in front of you. Now, the one exception to this is for whatever reason, right? We don't know why this is, but for whatever reason, when you get teleported into the bottom room, you spawn facing backward. So if you know, for example, that you are going to go to the right room and then you're going to go to the top room, or actually to make this a better example, let's say you start in the right room from spawn, and then you go to the bottom room, and then you go to the left room, and then you go to the top room, and you know that you, for example, need to be looking behind you, right, when you spawn in, right? Then you're going to go behind, then front, then behind, right? It's BFBB, because in the back room, when you get to the back room, you're facing backward. So you just do the opposite of whatever you would normally do to follow Toland. Okay, does that make sense? So what would normally be in front of you is going to be behind you when you get teleported into the back room. That's the only difference here that you need to be aware of. Okay, so let's actually go ahead and watch Crew do this. So he's going to go ahead, he's going to spawn kill this hobgoblin. He is going to switch to his rocket sidearm like we talked about. He gets some Lumina to stack it up and give it to Alex so that he can get benevolence. And then Crew is going to do something called jump dunking. Basically in Proph, when you jump while dunking, it extends the radius of your slam so that you can cleanse the plate further away than if you had been on the ground. On top of this, from the dunk, there's a certain timer where the hobgoblins in your room will begin to despawn. So by jump dunking so that he's closer to mid, Crew allows himself the maximum amount of time to help him kill the snipers early for the next room. Now, if you were not aware, I'm saying kill the snipers early, and I mentioned this earlier, but if you actually kill the hobgoblins after you finish dunking and activate the elevator in your room, it starts to spawn the knights in the next room, right? When you get into that elevator, it thinks you're in the next room already, and so it starts to spawn those knights there. So what these guys are going to do is, in this room in particular, they only have like 2 snipers, so they're going to get 2 knights in the next room, but every room subsequently after that, they're going to kill 4 snipers so that they can spawn in 4 knights, 1 in every single corner, like, you know, top left. As you guys know, in every single Proph, you know, cube room, there are 4 knight spawns, 1 in each corner of the map. And this way, because they have 4 knights prepped, they can opt for any pathing that they want to any dunk. So for example, if they wanted to do bottom, they could go to bottom left, to bottom right, and then to bottom. Whereas if they only had, let's say, for example, like these 2 knight spawns, right, instead of, you know, pre-killing 4 hobgoblins, they'd have to travel all the way over here, then all the way over here to dunk on bottom, right? So that's another thing in this encounter. You can pre-shoot snipers in a previous room once the elevator is active, and then the game thinks that you're in the next room and pre-spawns those knights so you don't have to wait as long. So you're going to see him, he's going to jump dunk here. Another thing Crew can do here is he can sword off of the elevator once it's been activated, and he will automatically get teleported into the next room, as you can see here, but he's free to move in the meantime and do whatever he needs to, on top of being able to Phoenix dive here. This is one of the craziest POVs of any encounter that you're going to see in a dungeon speedrun, just purely off the fact that like Crew is like sorting basically instantly where he knows the knights are going to spawn, and Phoenix diving as his camera is literally being rotated. I mean, you can see here when he gets teleported, his camera is literally being rotated. He turns around, he gets this knight over here, and in this room in particular, he is going to go ahead and dunk. And you'll see here, there was something very brief here that Crew did that he doesn't actually use that much in this particular run, but it's something called Nade skating. Basically, what you can do is when you have motes and you do like the melee lunge attack with the motes, you can cancel this animation by charging a grenade, and he's on heat rises, so he starts charging his grenade for a brief moment, and that allows him to chain it into like an Icarus dash and a glide combo that speeds him up significantly when he's holding motes, and he's aiming for a lot of horizontal momentum. Now, in this particular run, they actually don't run into many situations where Crew needs to nade skate, so not maybe the best example of a run that I can showcase nade skating in, but you'll see here just very briefly here, right? You'll see that he activates his nade there, he does a little nade skate there, okay? So that's also an essential part of Cube here. You're going to see, again, he's pre-killing snipers. He's giving himself Ember of Benevolence to get that Phoenix dive back. Another adaptation that has been made after this season came out, obviously, Aberrant Action has Strategist, so you can also use that to guarantee that you get your Phoenix dive back now as well. Again, Crew is just Phoenix diving. Again, there's kind of a Phoenix dive bug here where, like, if you Phoenix dive too quickly after, I think, sorting, it kind of, like, stops you midair for some reason, similar to, like, if you try to Phoenix dive and collide into a wall there. So that's what was going on kind of there. Crew, once again, is going to jump dunk. Okay, so we've been watching this encounter for a little while now. They're on room 3, I believe, out of the 5 that they need. So this next room is going to be room number 4. Again, he's going to Phoenix dive. So you can see how the difficulty in this encounter comes from knowing every single room and knowing the optimal pathing to get to the dunk in that room, on top of having fast ad clear, fast movement, not missing motes, and staying alive, right? So there's a lot of stuff going on in this encounter. Crew has his sword here that he right clicks the knight with, and then boom, again he jump dunks one more time. This is room 4, and then finally they're going to get to the last room before boss, where something special is going to happen here. So Crew ground lines here. He's going to pick up these motes, and he's going to do a special kind of jump dunk here where he really sends it here. He really sends it. He practically lands on the plate as soon as he's done dunking. And you'll see here, he kind of even hesitated to make sure that it was perfect. And the reason for this is because this room in particular is right before the boss room. And there is a strategy that you can use called early boss, which spawns in the bosses early, the mini bosses in the next room, just as if they were knights. So you know how, Crew and Alex have been repeatedly early killing hobgoblins in order to spawn in the knights in the next room ahead of time? You can do that with those Centurion mini bosses. So something important that you should know about this encounter is that while this is not immediately apparent at the start of the encounter when these guys are just killing 4 hobgoblins on a cycle every single time to spawn in knights, there is a counter system in the prophecy encounter. Now let's think of a room as having 4 quadrants. You have maybe 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? And so the way the counter system works is every single time you kill a hobgoblin in this encounter, it will spawn a knight in one of these 4 quadrants. However, it won't spawn it in like one repeatedly over and over and over. Obviously, the game wants to give you some variety. So every time you kill a hobgoblin, the counter progresses by 1, and it goes like clockwise, for example. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then back over to 1. Now, in every single hobgoblin room, in every single room where they're killing these hobgoblins and spawning these knights in, it's not immediately obvious that this counter system is in play because they kill 4 in every single room, and so they spawn 4 knights in the next room. However, there is a certain tempo on this counter that you need to be on in order for early boss to work, because early bosses always spawn in the same 2 quadrants. So if your counter is not in the right position when you're going to the next room and you kill a hobgoblin, it's not going to spawn early boss, because let's say for example that the early bosses are in quadrants 3 and 2. If your counter is on 4 and 1 and then you kill 2 hobgoblins, well, you're not going to get early boss because the tempo of the counter is not correct, right? It's gonna try to spawn adds on 1 and 4, and the bosses are not there. They're not on 1 and 4, right? And so you might ask, why not just kill 4 going into the next room? Well, the thing is, early boss has a very precise timing. And the way this timing works is as follows. So let's say you have dunk, you have elevator, and then you have like early boss spawn in the next room, right? And basically what you want to do is you want to minimize the time between dunk and an elevator to be as small as possible, because dunking starts the despawn timer of the hobgoblins. So basically you need to kill these hobgoblins late enough that it will still trigger early boss, but early enough that they don't despawn or go immune, right? And so that's why Crew spends so much time with this specific jump dunk. This jump dunk, it launches himself as far forward as possible to give him and Alex the largest window to do early boss, because if you kill the hobgoblins too early, they won't count for early boss, and if you try to kill them too late, they will go immune and despawn. So that's why this jump dunk is so important in particular. And of course, if you're wondering how they actually keep track of the counter for the tempo for getting early boss to actually work, Alex here on Xeno is killing an extra hobgoblin every once in a while in certain rooms that they've predetermined in order to keep the counter progressing at the right tempo. So he's not only just killing 4, but he's also killing an additional hobgoblin to spawn an additional knight to progress that counter so that they're in the perfect position when they reach the final room. This is a pretty interesting mechanic. I've never seen a counter mechanic like this where it kind of facilitates doing like an early boss strategy where they count as adds. So again, another one of the crazy intricate complexities in this cube encounter. So let's go ahead and keep going. Once again, you can see there, he's just ADSing on that hobgoblin because he knows the perfect time right before it's about to go immune. And then they get teleported into this final boss room. As you can see, these Centurions are spawning in 2 specific quadrants, nice and early, as if they were knights, and Crew gives himself Radiant so that he can over-penetrate with his horsemen. Through this knight, he told me sometimes the knight would like block the shots of him trying to kill the Centurion, so having Radiant allows his horsemen to over-penetrate and 1-mag that mini-boss. Okay, so right about now, these guys are early calling so that their skipper, whose POV you can see in the top right, they're calling right when the encounter ends so that their skipper can pull out his sword and pre-line right when he needs to, okay? So I hope you guys kind of understand why Cube is such a complex encounter, right? So this whole time you were thinking about, what room am I in? Am I in top? Am I in left? Am I in right? Where is Toland? Is he in front of me or is he behind me? Oh, he's behind me. That means I should be looking behind me all the time until I get to the bottom room, in which case I should be looking in front of me. And then once I dunk in front of me, it goes back to being behind. This whole time you're thinking, where's the dunk? Where are the knights spawning? How am I going to pre-kill this hobgoblin on time? Do I have my Phoenix dive? Okay, I'm going to Phoenix dive on this knight. I'm going to kill him. Where's the next knight that I should go to optimally path towards the dunk? Then you have to jump dunk. Your Xeno guy is keeping track of the counter. It's like there's a lot of stuff going on at the same time, and it's a very fast-paced encounter, right? So let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and look at Alex's POV just so I can show you exactly what I mean when I say that he's just spam killing hobgoblins, right? So he's on Ember of Empyrean with Xenophage like I mentioned. Let's just skip kind of into here. In total, I'm told they have to kill 2 extra hobgoblins in order to get that counter on the correct progression here. So as you can see here, Alex, he's going to go ahead, help Crew kill those knights. As you can see, he's just one-shotting them. He's killing extra knights to spawn in extra hobgoblins, and as he goes up, he's just look at that, 1, 2, 3, 4, and Crew is obviously helping him. Generally speaking, there is a predetermined strategy where the cube runner, this is the cube shooter role, the cube runner role, aka Crew, they generally kill the hobgoblins that are attached to the structures that are jutting out from the boss room wall, which we've talked about before. That's always going to be on either left or right of your room, depending on where you are. Okay, so now we're going to move on past Cube and we're going to talk about Cube skip. So while this whole thing is going on, what is Gab doing? So remember how earlier Gab hit that second Toland in Wasteland and his teammates duoed the rest of the encounter? They're heading to the third set of lights now. Well, Gab is slipping, but he's not making his way to the last Toland. He's actually sliding under this ramp and he's going to leave on skip. But you might notice, Gab, this isn't the way that Kell is. Why are you going towards crew? Where are we going? Well, the reason why Gab is here is because obviously, as you guys know, every encounter in Destiny, or almost every encounter in Destiny, has joining allies. And so if Gab were to just try to leave on skip and go to Kell right away, he would get pulled back into this encounter. So there's a precise timing here that Gab is waiting for to leave on skip here. You'll see that even after the encounter starts, he doesn't leave right away. So he's waiting. It says the realm responds to your actions. He's waiting for them to finish the room so that joining allies goes away. So you'll see here, he's waiting. Sorry, I skipped a little too far ahead. So yeah, he's waiting, boom, he lines right when they finish the room. You see the joining goes away. And now Gab has to do this little skip here. He's waiting for a firebolt nade here, which is why he's pausing for so long, if you're wondering. Boom, he gets his nade for heat rises. And then he's going to make his way under the map here. Now there's a lot of death barriers directly under Gab that can make this a rather treacherous skip. If he dips a little too low in any of the sections where the wasteland is relatively elevated, he will die instantly. So he needs to be very careful here that he does not do that. He's going to take his time here and just make his way underneath the wasteland, the sands of the wasteland here. And once again, he's going to find his way again onto another platform. He's going to get another nade back using bomber. And he's going to make his way to the final location for this skip. So you might recognize this area as the end of Wasteland, where you go after Cube is over. You start heading to Kell. He's going to spawn a sparrow here so they can stand on it and line off of it. And now you'll recognize probably why his teammates are giving him an early go call. So Gab, he's waiting right here for his teammates to say that the encounter is over so that he can pull out his sword early and line into this area. Now the thing about this area is that there's a portal hitbox here that only spawns in when Cube is over. So if he were to line too early, he would just crash into the wall and lose all of his momentum once he gets teleported. But if he lines too late, then obviously it's going to be time loss because he's going to be slower than he could possibly be on his transition. So you'll see here, I'm going to go ahead and skip forward a little bit. Right when the objective updates and he hears his teammates call, he lines and then boom, you can see that he carries all of that momentum from his well skate straight into the portal, hits this beautiful, nice little bounce off of these walls, and boom, he's straight into starting his slipstream. Okay, now you guys have probably seen this before if you've seen a Proph record before. I mean, this is nothing new, right? Probably the only interesting thing about this is that unlike most slipstreaming sections in this game, whether it's DSC or Grasp of Avarice, you're slipping downward here and you're slipping purely for speed and not really height at all because of how far you need to drop. So Gab here, he's going to try and position his sparrow right perfectly into the middle of this kind of like wind tunnel here. His teammates are rejoining him. And he's going to turn his sparrow upside down here, line off the back of his sparrow. That's a classic right there. Hits his head a little bit, but it's not too bad. And he's making sure he doesn't track to any thralls here. And you'll see as soon as he hits this checkpoint here and the objective updates, his teammates spawn in dead. This is kind of like a death warp. We've talked about this before. Sometimes in new objectives and getting into new regions will pull your teammates' orbs forward into an encounter, even if you haven't started the encounter itself. So Gab is going to res his teammates. And we're going to go ahead and talk about quickly what he does on his role. Then we're going to go back to crew. And then that's going to be it. So crew is actually rejoined on Hunter here. Like we talked about before, technically Gab's role can be done on a Hunter, which means you would have 3 Hunters on Final Boss, which means 3 Goldies, which means an even faster kill. But again, crew rejoins on Hunter after doing his cube role on Warlock. He gets spawned in here and he gets rezzed by Gab, who then continues to place the flag. And you might notice here, he's rallying on Stasis and Tessellation. I think this might be the first recorded instance of Tessellation being used in any speedrun. But the way he uses it is he just one-shots the knight. Yeah, he just one-shots the knight with his Tessellation. Obviously, he's on Osmio as well, so he can get multiple nade charges. And he's reprocking his Envious there by pulling out his rocket. Pretty interesting stuff here, you know, using Tessellation to one-shot the knights. Pretty important that these knights die quickly because their spawns are gated to each other. He's going to go ahead and pop his super. And for those of you that were clever there, he just loadout swapped to Ballador's Wrathweavers. So his teammates are both on Envious Explosive Light Cold Comforts, and so they are going to be able to receive his Stasis weapon boost here, this 4-time surge from them. He's going to Shockwave them so that they receive that Stasis Shard Overshield as well as the Ballador's buff, and then he's going to land with his teammates. right? So another thing with Gab's role, I don't believe it's done on stasis anymore. You would do it on either Prismatic Warlock or I suppose a Hunter so that he can also fast drop, because boss damage actually doesn't start until the entire fire team is down on this platform. So his teammates actually do delay a little bit of their damage, and you'll see that in a second here. But let's go ahead and look at the rest of his damage. Again, just Izzy, Rocket, 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 one more Izzy, and the boss is pretty much dead at this point. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's look at Crew's POV, and let's give a final send-off to this run here, this beautiful run. And so Crew, he's going to get rezzed. You'll see here that all three of these guys have different kind of tech for killing these knights. Crew and Alex, for example, are both on trench barrel aggressive shotguns, as well as a high impact fusion. They both one-shot knights here, so pretty cool. He uses a proximity explosive knife in order to trigger a trench barrel, which I believe at this time was like recently buffed to work with ranged melee, so pretty cool. So he one-shots his knight there. He quickly swaps to his heavy weapon there to get restoration ritual. Also, one of the reasons why one of them dies right at the start of the encounter, like you probably have noticed, is because of restoration ritual, right? You can res one of your teammates to get restoration ritual procced. Boom, he has 3 in his bag here. And finally, for this last knight in particular, he's going to go ahead and high impact fusion him. And finally, he is going to go to the dunk. Right, so he does one more jump dunk here. And you'll see that Alex and Crew have actually rallied on 6 Coyote. And the reason for this is because they have a very specific timing where they dodge onto the teleport so that it sucks them in, and then they dodge away from it in order to get the fast drop down to damage while also giving themselves a damage buff. It's pretty cool. They do it in sync here. It's like a cool speedrunning moment, right? They get the extra drop here, and then boom. So you'll notice here that Crew actually waits a little bit to Goldie, and that's just because of what I was talking about earlier, where Gab has to make it down. He's actually immune for a temporary moment here, right until Crew is Goldieing. Boom, Izzy, Rocket, 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 dodge, Rocket, snipe, snipe, and boom, clean one blade. Okay, that is pretty much it. Obviously, he swapped from Nighthawk into Knucklehead there, so he can get a little bit of extra damage right as the boss was going to die in that last 30%. But yeah, that is it. Prophecy done in 4:55. This team is probably going to run for an even lower 4-minute time in the future, or a similar iteration of this team with Syncbox. So pretty exciting stuff. This is like the culmination of a lot of work from Crew and his boys over the years, iterating on different strategies. And you can definitely see how much work has been put into it, from how crazy fast they start Phalanx, the clever strats they use with the mote dunks, to the Wasteland RNG and the clever pathing that they use there with the cool cube skip. The amount of crazy technical work that goes into learning how to be a fast cube runner. Crew is, of course, undoubtedly in the dungeon community the best cube runner that there is, and will likely stay that way for the remaining time that this dungeon is available. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, boss is actually fairly simple for being a final boss encounter. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this dungeon breakdown. Pretty crazy to see these guys run this so fast. And I think we're going to be talking about Grasp next, but I have some other videos planned before that. Goodbye for now.